Ну, я був в лагері «Мечта» в Євпаторії. Там условий для жизни, ну, вообще ноль.
Мечта. И потом нас перевели в дружбу.
В «Мечте», когда мы только приехали, до 1000 было, по-моему, детей. И в «Дружбе» так, и в «Лучистом» также. Было много детей.
Ні, нам говорили, типа, розмовляти типа, на русском. Сказали, що нам треба забути українську типа, мову. Типа, сказали, це типа, як, не буде такого язика.
Напрямую говорили, вот, вы тут как в тюрьме, у вас нет своего мнения, есть наше неправильное.
Вас сюди, типа, як в дідом здали, ви від родителей типа, нікому не треба. У вас страна, яка вбиває дітей, терористи. Вам не треба такий. Хто це вам таке? Астахов Валерій Васильович. Він отвечает за безопасность, что в лагере неполнолетних, щось там.
Он говорил то, что все украинцы хохлы, кастрюли.
Нацисты, фашисты назвал нас.
Спалював флаг перед нами український. Ну, заводили дітей в підвали за те, що вони типа, за Україну. Типа, казали слава Україні. Ну, коротше, матами типа, обозвали, типа, що ви такі тупі, типа, ви Україні не треба.
Перед школой каждый день была, так сказать, линейка, и заставляли стоять под русский гимн.
А там не спрашивают. Там заставляют. Объяснительно или в изоляторе закроют.
Ми сиділи там в ізоляторі 4 дня. Потім ми випрашували, щоб нас відпустили. І так нас відпустили. Якщо б ми не випрашували, нас, мабуть, би не випустили. «Вперед, Росія» щось, пісню нас заставляли вчити.
Вот это частая песня, которую заставляли. Да, ну, проверки приезжали, прям уже заела эта песня им. В Херсонской области, ну, там мужчина приезжал, один, да. А с Москвы там человек 15.
Ну, там много дітей, які плакали за те, що їх били. Вважаті, закривали в кімнаті, матами кричали на них, били палками, заставляли убирати там по коридорам.
Нас водили на пляж, мы убирали территорию, так скажем, для крымских детей.
Кормили нас, як собак.
Было маленькие порции давали. Ну, то есть половина детей даже не наедалась.
Там суп просто прозрачний, картошка, може, якийсь кусочок плаває, і рис, либо якась каша.
Там были котлеты, будто с отходов каких-то. Потом плохо после них.
Потом плохо, тошнило. В принципе, безопаснее было ничего не есть. Говорили, что, в принципе, хотим домой. Мы заполняли бланки, нам говорили, что приедут какие-то волонтеры. Мы ждали, но, конечно, в итоге никто не приехал.
Коли останній раз посміхалися от прямо на всі?
Ну, скорее всего, когда мы приехали в Волынскую область,
Да.
когда мы увидели вот этот сам, когда мы проходили границу через Беларусь в Украину и увидели вот эту вот табличку «Украина», наверное, тогда.
Да.
Good morning. Very hard to say good morning after seeing that. Very shocking, but very happy that we are having this discussion and that we can cooperate with the Office of the President of Ukraine on this conference and photo exhibition. I'm Fabian Zuleeg, the Chief Executive of the EPC, and I'll be moderating this first panel. It's an important discussion to have, not least also because it is just in advance of the Peace Summit in Switzerland. and it will be one of the key points on that summit's agenda. We have seen since the first day of the invasion that children have been victims of aggression, of cruelty, with tens of thousands killed, injured, and psychologically damaged. We have also seen, and we saw the testimony there, that many children have been kidnapped and forcibly taken to Russia or into Ukraine's temporarily occupied territories, with the number being in excess of 20,000, many of them sent to re-education camps. Many of those have not only been abducted, but they have been put up for adoption by authorities, given new identities, new identity papers, which of course makes it extremely difficult to even locate these children, let alone return them to where they belong. Russian President Putin and his Commissioner for Children's Rights, Maria Lvova-Belova, have been issued with arrest warrants by the ICC for the war crime of unlawful deportation of children, as Moscow stands accused of using this in an attempt to crush Ukrainian identity. I think it is, and I was just remarking on that before we started, it is surprising that there isn't more of a global outcry in this instance. It is abhorrent to any culture to take someone else's children and to force them into a different identity. So today we will have a deep dive into the topic. The Bring Kids Back UA initiative, which was established in 23 by President Zelensky, will be the focus of our discussion today, with the key goal of reuniting Ukrainian children with their families who have been abducted by Russia. For that, a special task force has been created, which is co-chaired by Baroness Helen Kennedy, who's going to speak in a minute, and the head of the Office of the President, Andriy, and coordinated by Daria Zarivna, Senior Advisor to the head of the Office of the President of Ukraine, and also Chief Operating Officer at Bring Kids Back UA, and you will be speaking as well in a few minutes. So we will be covering today preliminary findings of research which has been carried out into this topic, and the final working paper will be available to all of you very soon. We will have the initial inputs, and then afterwards we also have a panel of respondents, and I will introduce everyone in turn. But very glad that we're having this discussion, and I'm looking forward to having an exchange on this important topic. And we will start with Baroness Kennedy, who joins us online. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chair, for that introduction. And it's wonderful to see a number of close colleagues here on your panel. I see there from the President's office, Daria, who has been a really important ally in the work that has been done, and to see the Prosecutor General, Andriy Kostin, who has been the most extraordinary leader of the legal issues that have arisen during this war, and leading really a commitment to the rule of law, which so often falls away during hostilities and conflicts. And Andriy, I want to say a particular tribute to the fact that you have held true to the principles of law, behaving in the most to the highest of standards with regard to the cases that have come already before courts, but the ways in which you have negotiated so many aspects of the legal issues that arise during a war. Now, there's none, I think, more grievous than this issue that we're discussing today, which has been the abduction, the theft of Ukraine's children. And only last week, I was meeting with senior officials in connection to war crimes. And one of the officials, not of course a Ukrainian, said that they were surprised at the swift nature in which arrest warrants were issued in relation to Putin and Madame Belova, his commissioner on children's rights, so swiftly as the first endeavor by the International Criminal Court in relation to the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. And I posed the question was being asked as to why those warrants, why on this issue? And my response to it was, can you imagine a more grievous crime than the taking of a nation's children, which is the theft of a nation's future? And that's why this is so terrible, and why there was a swiftness of action by the International Criminal Court's prosecutor in applying for warrants against Putin and Belova, was because we know that in a young person's life, in a child's life, the separation from family is so disruptive that the impact lives with them for the rest of their life. We know also that that the impact, that changes in a child's life happen very quickly. And so in a matter of a very short time, huge damage can be done to the individual child, but also the consequences of that for their siblings, for their parents, for their extended family. And so the impact of this is far-reaching, and far-reaching because of the impact it has on the whole of the nation of Ukraine. So as I've been doing this work, which has now been for 6 months, I have the stories that I've heard from children, from their families, the stories that I've heard from the officials and the incredible commissioner who has been working on this in Ukraine and seeking the return and working so hard at creating alternative places for the children so that they can return and be in families, because they're going to be so in need of the warmth of a family to receive them, that the work that has been done has been extraordinary, and I want to pay tribute to all of it. I wanted to deal with the fact that there are many crimes that have been committed with regard to the taking of the children. The business of the taking of a child's identity, of denying them their own relationship to their nation, by telling them that they're not Ukrainian, that there's no such thing, by insisting upon this the language being Russian, and denying the use of the Ukrainian language, the rubbing out of a history and of previous affections and relations and so on. The cruelty and the depth of that criminality cannot be underestimated. And in the course of the period where we've been working, and my visiting with frequent visits to Geneva, meeting with UNICEF, meeting with those who at the Human Rights Commission and so on, to discuss with them the actions that should be taken by the international community. And there is no doubt, and I want to just agree with the fact that I think there hasn't been enough outrage. I have spoken at so many different meetings about this matter, but and it's great that there is a coalition of many nations being supportive of Ukraine, particularly on this issue. But the clamor from the world has not been as one would have expected. And so I hope that we can drive it back onto the front of the agenda. And the fact that the G7 meeting is taking place in these next days, that there will be proper discussions about the use of, for example, the interest that has accrued on the monies that have been frozen in accounts where there have been sanctions, that money is used to good purposes inside Ukraine. And one of the purposes that I think that the international community should be considering is the ways in which there can be help given to Ukraine, which is having to deal with a war, which needs munitions, which needs the war effort to be funded to bring this to an end, but also to enable some of the underbelly work that has to go on in preparing for the aftermath of this war. Now, people ask me constantly, why would Russia do this? Why has Russia taken the children? Wasn't it simply taking children out of the theatre of war? Let me tell you, there's no question of this being an act of beneficence. I have no doubt as to the very complicated and multiple motives that there are in this. But one of the leading motions, which is a disgrace in terms of conduct of a nation, is that there is no doubt that Russia will be using these children as a bargaining chip. There are many of the children that it will be very hard to recover because of their own age and because of the changes of identity, of the adoptions that we know are taking place. But the other problem is that I have no doubt that Putin has intentions of putting onto the table an insistence that if you want all of these children back, rather than the dribs and drabs, the small numbers that he will allow to trickle out to show that he's not a man of malintent. But in fact, what he wants is to have a bargaining chip of basically being able to say, you'll get your children back so long as, and then there will be the demands that he will be making. And so I have no doubt as to the purpose of this. But delay when it comes to children is a serious problem. It's why waiting until the end of hostilities is not good enough. And we have to be demanding return of the children now and not waiting until a point in time where one hopefully can see an end to this terrible war and the toll that it's taking on the Ukrainian people and the threat that it makes to the wider world in terms of democracy, in terms of the values that we believe are vital to creating a civilized world. But you are not living in a civilized world where children are being used in this way as pawns in a war, causing pain of another kind when a nation is already suffering so much. So I really just wanted to open this serious discussion about what can be done on the international stage, how we can draw more people on side to actually demand that these children are returned now, that the work that is going on the ground inside Ukraine while a war is going on, incredible work going on in clear identification of who those children are, trying to discover members of their extended families, trying to think of ways of bringing those families together. And that work is going on, and the labor of it needs support. Financial help is needed for families to take back their children and to be able to afford the business of getting the support that they will need. We need to be training up many more people to help with the therapeutic impacts of the kind of traumatic separations and experiences that these children have had. So there's so much work that's going to have to be done when at the end of all of this, and even as we have these children coming back, we know that their suffering lives on with them. So there is much that the international community can be doing and funding and supporting and helping with the training of the therapeutic counseling, because there's absolutely no doubt as to the social and psychological impact this has, not just on the children themselves, but on their families and their close members of their families and on their siblings. The separation of children from their brothers and sisters is one of those things that has been described in so many historical situations where children in war are separated from those that they love. So I really, I'm glad to see that there has been this gathering put together. I'm sorry that I'm not with you. I'm afraid that my husband is very ill and I'm having to attend some medical meetings with him today. But I just want to send my very, very strong commitment to all of you to speak to the incredible courage of the Ukrainian people and the people that I've been working with. And to say to all my colleagues from other parts of the world, we need to come together and really speak of the outrage that is taking place with regard to the families of Ukraine. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. A number of things there to also return to in the discussion. But next I turn to Andriy Kostin, the Prosecutor General of Ukraine. Baroness Kennedy already introduced you, but certainly it will be very important to hear what your work is and what you can do at this moment in time.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I hope that Baroness is with us, maybe for at least for a couple of minutes. Just want to thank you, dear Baroness, dear Helena. Thank you for your exceptional leadership and efforts you're undertaking to protect and to save the most vulnerable Ukrainians, our children. Because saving our children means saving a future of our nation. And your excellent, exceptional cooperation with the co-chair of the working group, head of presidential office, Andriy Yermak, I think it's a great example of how such difficult, really difficult projects should be implemented. Excellencies, friends and colleagues, I'm glad to have an opportunity to discuss with you the accountability track undertaken by Ukraine in relation to forced transfer and deportation of Ukrainian children that has been reflected in the draft working paper prepared by the Bring Kids Back UA task force. Before I turn to the issue at hand, I would like to use this opportunity to express my deep gratitude to the members of the Bring Kids Back UA task force and the international coalition of the states for their determination and commitment to return each and every forcibly displaced Ukrainian child while ensuring justice and proper care for them. With your permission, I would like to address the issue of forcible transfer and deportation of Ukrainian children from several dimensions, starting from the proper classification of such acts as international crimes on national and international level. So, war crime of forced deportation and transfer of Ukrainian children. Forced deportation and transfer both entail forcible displacement of persons from an area in which they are lawfully present without grounds permitted under international law. In case of an armed conflict, the international humanitarian law rules, more specifically, Fourth Geneva Convention of 1949 and its additional Protocol 1, determine the legal framework applicable to forcible transfers. Needless to say, it becomes even more abhorrent if such practices are conducted against children in a deliberate and planned manner. Most importantly, Russia does not act randomly. It's a pattern of repeating behavior. In 2014, following the military occupation and annexation of Crimea, Russia introduced the project called the Train of Hope. Russian citizens could go by train to Crimea in order to illegally adopt Ukrainian children. Since February 2022, Ukrainian children are being gathered from child care institutions across occupied territories and displaced as far as possible from their motherland in Russia. Some children are directly taken from family or separated from their parents in the filtration camps organized by Russian armed forces and then moved to Russia proper. The fate has been similar for those children whose parents died during the siege of Ukrainian cities or in course of urban hostilities, and they fell into the hands of the occupying authorities. Over 19,500 children have been forcibly displaced, and this is it's only official data without the complete information from the occupied territories. Ukraine does not deny the fact that during the conduct of hostilities, temporary evacuation of the civilian population, including children, is a legitimate objective. However, according to international humanitarian law, rules, evacuations shall ensure that members of the same family are not separated. Most importantly, Russia's actions are neither genuine nor humanitarian in nature. United Nations Independent Commission of Inquiry on Ukraine has specifically concluded that transfers of Ukrainian children were not justified by safety considerations or a medical reason, which means that Russian authorities sought no alternative possibilities which could avoid the transfer of unaccompanied children to Russian-controlled areas or to Russian Federation. Russia authorities relocated children without the consent of the parents or legal guardians. In other cases, the consent was collected under duress. In some incidents, transfers occurred regardless of the explicit refusal of the parents of the children. Finally, the forcible displacement of Ukrainian children is not temporary by nature. Russia has put in place dedicated legislative and policy measures which are indicative of a strategy to accommodate children from Ukraine into Russia permanently. Part of these children, even toddlers, are put for adoption into Russian families via online advertised adoption websites. So its practice supported and even co-perpetrated by Russian officials. Moreover, parents and legal guardians encounter an array of obstacles in establishing contact, achieving family reunification and returning children to Ukraine. Our ongoing criminal proceedings for war crime of forced transfer and deportation of Ukrainian children combines 168 criminal proceedings and is directly supervised by the specialized unit of our Children's Department of the Office of Prosecutor General. We have made a deliberate decision to use experienced prosecutors working with children in order to ensure the victim-centered approach while also securing best interests of the child. We have already made a progress and issued suspicion notices against 7 persons, including a deputy of State Duma of the Federal Assembly of Russian Federation, a spouse of the political party leader, so-called Just Russia Party, directly involved in the deportation of Ukrainian children, a head of the de facto Department of Health of the occupying authority of Kherson region, a deputy head of the de facto or so-called Department of the Youth Policy, Family and Sports in the military civil administration of the occupying authority in Kherson region. In parallel, we closely cooperate with the International Criminal Court that has issued its first arrest warrants in Ukrainian case in March 2023 against Vladimir Putin and so-called Russia's Child Commissioner Lvova Belova, precisely for the war crime of forced transfer and deportation of Ukrainian children to Russia. We also believe that the deportation as well as forcible transfer of Ukrainian children committed in widespread and systematic manner amounts to the crime against humanity, falling under the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court. The organized nature of displacement of more than 19,500 Ukrainian children, coupled with the institutional, legislative and operational changes related to citizenship, guardianship and adoption processes in Russia, negates any probability of their random occurrence. It is centrally coordinated with dozens of federal, regional and local figures directly engaged in operating and politically justifying the state policy of Russian Federation. By targeting and stealing the next generation of Ukrainians, Russia is manifestly demonstrating a brutal extinction policy against the Ukrainian people, implemented alongside the widespread and systematic campaign of torture, ill treatment and unlawful confinement of civilians in occupied territories. As we continue the complementary burden sharing with the ICC in investigating and prosecuting international crimes, we very much hope that the court will consider prosecution of the forced transfer and deportation of Ukrainian children from the crimes against humanity perspective, as it has done so this March 2024, while issuing 2 additional arrest warrants against Russian military commanders who ordered attacks against critical energy infrastructure in Ukraine. Forced transfer of children from one national group to another is also one of the prohibited acts under the Genocide Convention of 1948. We very well understand that the crime of genocide is act committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part one of the four protected groups. It is not easy to prove, however, as we collect relevant evidence in relation to the crime of genocide and public incitement to commit genocide, we examine the cases related to forced transfer of Ukrainian children from that perspective as well. So what can be done by Ukraine and the international community? I believe the working paper, Safeguarding Children from Forcible Transfer and Deportation under International Law, explores the response to this question in a comprehensive manner and proposes a number of important recommendations. Their implementation is heavily dependent on the support and contribution from our partners and friends, including the accountability efforts, being both punitive and preventive in nature. Russia, as a state, shall bear full responsibility for planning and implementing persecutory policy against Ukrainian children through the resolutions and mechanisms available within the international and regional organizations. We shall continue to hold individuals responsible for planning, organizing, and carrying out the forced transfer and deportation practices liable before international tribunals and national courts. We shall further employ sanctions against Russian Federation, entities, and individuals involved in forced transfer and deportation of Ukrainian children. Most importantly, Russia shall be pressured and forced to remedy existing situation, return each and every Ukrainian child without exception. Thank you, dear colleagues, for your attention.
Thank you very much. A very good overview of the situation, but also what can be done. We now turn to the working paper, and already we had, you mentioned a number of times as Chief Operating Officer at Bring Kids Back UA. So we're looking forward to hearing the work you're doing at this moment.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for all of you for coming today so we can discuss the additional ways of bringing our Ukrainian kids back. First of all, I want to thank, of course, EPC for helping us a lot, spreading the information and the messages about this horrible case. I also want to thank a lot the members of Bring Kids Back UA team. And surely Baroness Helena Kennedy, who believed in our idea of this task force and decided to jump into this with us, we are very, very grateful. And surely, yes, this the phrase which I've heard from Baroness Helena Kennedy is very, very strong and very powerful. Taking our kids away, this is literally taking our future away from us. And this is what Russia literally has been doing to Ukraine and to Ukraine's future. So the first slide is categories of kidnapped children. Before going into much detail as to why a differentiated approach is needed, I guess that it's necessary to clearly understand the groups of kidnapped children. And on a very high level, we can divide them into two groups. The first ones are orphans, the children whose parents have died or has been legally deprived of parental care. And this group includes also children from such institutions, which I will mention many times during my presentation later. These are the ones like Kherson Children Home and Ailish boarding house. And the second group is unaccompanied children. These are the children who have parents, but they have been separated from them for various reasons, mainly because of the military conflict. And why is it important? Why is it important to focus here? As I will show later, the one-fits-it-all approach simply doesn't work because we have different groups of children and we need to use different strategies and tactics working with them. Second slide, please. So, Russia's coordinated policy to delay returns. What is Ukraine facing all the time is that Russia implements a systematic and coordinated policy to complicate the return process as much as possible. They do it with the help of different instruments. First of all, no lists of evacuated children have ever been provided to ICRC, UN, or any other international organization. Second, children are dispersed throughout Russia and have been moved multiple times. Third thing, a very famous case of Margarita Prokopenko, who has been deported from Kherson and then has been adopted by Sergei Mironov, the leader of Just Russia political party, and her name was changed. And I think this is one of the cases maybe with which you are maybe familiar with. And the fourth thing is we have plenty of evidence of placement of Ukrainian children in Russian adoption databases. Perhaps some of you have read the recent Financial Times article about this. Slide 3, please. Russia's demands and conditions. So it's Russia who committed the war crime of deportation. All the burden lies entirely on Ukrainian side. First of all, Ukraine has to determine the whereabouts of children, which is very complicated due to the lack of humanitarian access provided from Russia and because, of course, of all their efforts to hide the kidnapped children. Second, why is it very complicated to make the family members apply for returning children back to them? First of all, because most of these family members, they live on the temporarily occupied territory. And of course, first of all, they are afraid of their safety and their security. And of course, they are afraid of well-being of their children. The third thing, trips to Russia. Again, one very loud case which we had is when the grandmother of one of the children died because of heart attack during such a trip. FSB interrogations, the necessity to travel through thousands of kilometers, many other difficulties which are created by Russian side in process. Of course, we understand that these trips are very complicated. Okay, we can move to the next slide. So what we understand and face for now is the limitation of current methods. First of all, these methods apply to not so large number of children which we managed to return, which perfectly plays for the Russian narratives and for the Russian interests. If we do not diversify and differentiate our approaches, and if we will not look at alternative mechanism, then I think that bringing our kids back would become even more complicated and will become even a slower process. We cannot afford this, so this is why we need to try additional approach. And here we move to another slide, please. So I would like to suggest discussing an additional approach using Kherson Children's Home and Aleshki boarding house as a case study. Let's move further. So, Aleshki Children's Boarding Home. Here I would like to give you some context. What is important to understand? Aleshki, myself, I'm from Kherson. And I've visited Aleshki boarding home a few times. Aleshki boarding home is famous for being the only Ukrainian facility for children with complex disabilities and very strong intellectual and mental developmental issues. So there were around 65 kids and 40 adults before the invasion. And in October 2022, just before the Ukrainian armed forces were about to return the region. Just before that, the Russian occupation authorities, they simply took children from Aleshki boarding home and brought them to Crimea. Like the number is around 82 children from Aleshki boarding home were taken out. Next slide, please. What is important to understand, the Russians did not allow and did not open a green corridor for evacuation of these children. And for now, for like June 2024, we have less than a dozen of these children returned to Ukraine. Again, Russia made no efforts to facilitate the return of these children. And again, we don't know anything about their conditions, about their, like where they are and how do they feel and the state of their health. Let's move to another slide, please. Now I want to speak about Kherson Children's Home. Kherson Children's Home was a regional orphanage for children under the age of 5. In a context similar to Aleshki, before the liberation of Kherson, the children from Kherson Children's Home were again brought to the temporarily occupied Simferopol, and there were 46 kids who has been illegally deported. Let's move to another slide. Again, the same here. Russia never opened a green corridor for evacuation of these children, no efforts to facilitate the return. Instead, Russia placed them for adoption. And if you have seen the recent investigation of New York Times, you might have seen the profiles of 22 children from Kherson on a Russian adoption website, and not only being on a Russian adoption website, but there were also additional aids advertising campaign on adopting these specific children. Let's move further. I think this is very emotional slide and very strong because the journalists managed to find the profiles and the photographs of these children. One more time, 50 children under the age of 5, not allowed to go to Ukraine, forcibly relocated to Russia, evidence of changed legal identity, placed for adoption in Russian website. Okay, let's move to another slide. So why I really found this slide very, very, how to say, psychologically and emotionally powerful, because you can see here how the changes, the faces of these children, how they change. So on some photos, you cannot even understand that this is the same kid, the same child. So the time is playing in Russia's favor. That means that the longer we drag and try to play to Russia's demands, the harder it will be to even recognize these children later. So we need to start working on returning the children from Aleshki Children's Boarding Home and Kherson Children's House. And this is what I've been trying to say, that now we would like to focus on particular projects and particular case studies like this. The next slide, please. So what we understand for now. Ukraine has all the rights to unconditionally demand the return of children, both from Aleshki and from Kherson boarding home. We are open to a third-party independent assessment of the best interests of these children. However, what is important, such an assessment couldn't be done on the territory of Russia. During the previous returns, Ukraine has developed an algorithm and engagement of cross-functional team for each child, ensuring that the kid is provided with all the necessary support and everything that is needed when it comes to rehabilitation and reintegration. And all the children who returned from deportation under the age of 16 have been placed in a family-based care. We are ready, and we will do the same for the children, both from Oleshki boarding house and from Kherson Children's Home. Next slide, please. Ukraine has already done its homework as regards on rehabilitation and reintegration of children, and yet this area would be also strengthened with the help of the international coalition for the return of Ukrainian children. And it won't be difficult to engage a trusted third party, and we already have an understanding of who this party could be. And what is severely lacking is a coordinated and systematical public transparent campaign aimed at increasing the international pressure on Russia and forcing them to return these children. Otherwise, we will never be able to get them back. Thanks a lot for your attention. I will be happy to hear the feedback from you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and very difficult to hear some of that, and of course for you, this is a very emotional topic. So we're now turning to the responses, but what I would like to ask the respondents is not only to talk about condemnation, not only to talk about how wrong this is, but to talk about what we can do and what we are going to do to address this. So I'm going from right to left, starting with Olaf Skog, the EU Special Representative for Human Rights.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Thank you for the invitation. Usually when you're in seminars like this, there is always, a debate, right? There are two sides to the argument, etc. But of course, that's not the case. There's no way you can end up in any other place than agreeing with everything that has been said here. And I say that as a human being, and I say it as the EU Special Representative for Human Rights. In my professional capacity, I'm supposed to cover and monitor human rights around the world, including international humanitarian law. And I think when you reflect on that, it's fundamental in every discussion we have to come back to the fact that what Russia is doing against Ukraine is sort of the mother of all violations. There's a lot of attention paid to other situations in the world. They deserve attention too, but it's important to come back to the fact that what we see here is so aggravating. Also what it does to international law, what it means for impunity, and what it means in terms of just setting aside the most basic rules of international behavior. So that's sort of a starting point. Now, I think breaking up a little bit what we've heard this morning, I think it's useful maybe to just break it down to 3 points: political, legal, and then the human, the individual aspect of the children. On the political side, I agree with what Baroness Kennedy and others have said, that we can do more in terms of political campaigning and to highlight and impress more political pressure on Russia. And there are group of friends and coalitions, etc., but it's still telling us, I think the Baroness said, that given the urgency of the matter and the scope of this, we can do more. I praise Ukrainian efforts and the EPC, events like this one, and the fact that this figures very prominently on the peace summit agenda in a few days' time. And believe me, we've done a lot to try to make sure that there are as broad participation at the peace summit as possible. But I also agree with what was said, that this is not something that should be part of a peace deal eventually. This is now, as Ms. Zarivna said. On the legal side, I think, again, I visited the prosecutor in Ukraine recently, and I just want to say that I'm so impressed with the work that Ukraine is carrying out, meticulously documenting every case of violations that Russia is committing. And although we are still to define the tribunal, etc., which I think will happen soon, I hope it will happen soon, but the fact that this is done really speaks to the fact that there will be no impunity in the end. And I think that also contributes to putting pressure on Russia. But it also means that we need to support the international organizations that are there to help build these cases. We need to help Ukraine carry out its work, but also support the ICC. I don't know if everyone is aware that Russia is setting up some countermeasures and threats against the judges of ICC. They're hacking into the documents and the databases of the ICC in a way that is completely unacceptable. And so we need to also help the ICC to protect what it has. And of course, make sure that ICC can operate also on other cases, by the way, that are happening around the world. So that's extremely important. Finally, maybe then just on the human dimension of this, and I'm glad that this has also been very prominently presented by our Ukrainian colleagues here this morning. I don't know how many of you have met some of these Ukrainian children face to face. I had the opportunity of meeting some very, very traumatized children in a safe space in Kiev, and I can tell you I see the face of one of those girls every day. And that just speaks to the urgency, but also to what I think you've rightly said, that we have to, yes, we're working on the legal basis. We're working to politically highlight this. But in the end, we also need to look at the best interest of the children, as you say. And some of that is to avoid publicity around individual cases. Working with UNICEF, I think, which are doing a very professional work across the world, including in Ukraine. And I also want to praise the fact that you are very much taking this approach. And we are ready as the EU to help you also, because I know the tradition in Ukraine has sometimes been the institutionalization. And I think the fact that you're moving away from that into a much more, a caring approach to each child, I think is something we're really trying to support. And I also want to praise the fact that you are working, including with the UN's efforts at children and armed conflict. And I think I know for sure now, having just met with the special representative last week in New York, that Russia will be listed for its violations and Ukraine will be praised for all the work you're doing to make sure that it's always the best interest of the child. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now turning to Ailish Campbell, Ambassador of Canada to the EU. I know your country has been very supportive and engaged in this issue. What I would like to maybe ask you is also to talk a bit about the wider global community and maybe counter the impression that in many places that this is seen as an issue which the West very much cares about, but it has not reached the global outrage which you would expect from an issue like this.
Sure. Thank you, Fabian and Andriy and Olaf. Daria, thank you so much for your remarks. It's an honor to be with you, as well as my colleague, Ambassador Chentsov. I want to highlight a few points, and I think, Fabian, I'll get to your really, I think, essential question. Just by highlighting, first and foremost, of course, as I think others have on this panel, that Russia's actions really strike at the most vulnerable, and this is the true test of international law and our commitment at the United Nations to international humanitarian law as well as rules of law. The real call here is one of action. What can we do? Moral outrage is important, but it now must be a springboard for actions, continual actions. Canada and Ukraine launched the International Coalition for the Return of Ukrainian Children in February 2024 during Minister Melanie Joly's visit to Kyiv. And there are now 37 member states who have joined the coalition and helping our efforts to reunite Ukrainian children with their families. I spoke with our ambassador to Ukraine this morning and asked her if I could give voice to her work with Ukraine and Norway and the United Nations and others. What would she ask me to say to you this morning here in Brussels? And the number one thing is, please get involved. If your embassy, if your mission is not one of those 37 countries that are already involved in our coalition, and I think, Olaf, you put it perfectly, your nation may or may not be attending the peace process, but please attend our coalition. Please put the interests of children first. Since the launch of this coalition, we've sought to convene member states regularly, as well as anyone who's interested in being an observer, anyone who's interested in finding out more about our work, to focus on areas including the rapid identification and tracing of Ukrainian children. This is one where nations with technical knowledge and abilities could really help us. Nations who have also experienced war and displacement of children. There are many nations, including across Africa and Asia, who have also experienced similar displacement. How can you help? And then those who are experts in the physical return and rehabilitation and psychosocial supports for these children. There's also the need to reintegrate into families, so those with strong family and social systems can help. These interventions are helping. There have been, as noted, a handful of very small number of children returned. It is simply not enough. I believe this is the number one test of Russia's humanity. We may have debates over many things, but the fact that children have not been returned to the country of their birth, to the institutions, to the families, to the communities who want to support them, is the most clear red line test of President Putin's intentions in this war and his general conduct, which I would argue not only affects Ukraine, but affects the entire world. I want to give special recognition to Qatar. Qatar has been very involved also in negotiations. I throw the floor open to ambassadors from other countries, and I'd be happy to host a meeting anytime here in Brussels with my Ukrainian colleague to reach out to those 37 countries that are already members, to have Qatar talk about its experience in a closed door setting, but also then to call on others who may wish to get involved in some other way. Children should never be pawns in a military or political activity between nation states. Childhood must be protected. And I think if you detect some passion in my voice, it is because I am the granddaughter of an orphan who 100 years ago was removed from the country of his birth, and at the age of 11 years old was sent to Canada to be an unpaid farm laborer. Thousands of children were forcibly displaced from England, Scotland, Ireland, Northern Ireland, and elsewhere, and brought to the colonies of Australia, South Africa, Canada, and elsewhere to be unpaid laborers. At the age of 17, he lied. He said he was 18, walked off the farm where he had been mentally, physically, and sexually abused, and enlisted in World War II to fight for Canada here in Europe because he thought it would be easier than the experience he was having on the farm. It's taken 2 generations. I'm proud to stand before you as the granddaughter of that orphan, but I can certainly assure you that he bore the scars, emotional scars of that experience for many years, and it will take time, energy, and focus for these children and their families to return to good health. Canada has also, of course, with the EU and others, sanctioned individuals and entities in Russia and Belarus involved in ongoing human rights violations. Let's continue to work on the important identification of these individuals so that they can be sanctioned. Of course, that includes Russia's presidential children's rights commissioner, Maria Lvova-Belova, as well as regional children's rights commissioners. I wish there was a way you could express that when you do writing. It's very easy physically when I do this for you to mean that when I say children's rights, I actually mean the opposite. These sanctions reflect Canada's ongoing concern for the violations of human rights of Ukrainians, especially children. So again, what can we do? Let's continue to have a meaningful dialogue. Let's continue to act. We are about to head into, as you know, the Swiss-based Summit on Peace in Ukraine, and I'm proud to say that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will be there, as long as representatives from the important Bring Back Kids Ukraine Task Force. Canada is proud to co-chair with Ukraine and Norway the working group at the peace discussions, Working Group 4 of Ukraine's 10-point peace formula, which concerns the release of all political and military prisoners and deportees, detained civilians and children. And we will co-chair an event on this working group at the summit. We'll continue to work with Ukraine. And again, I'll just say that the experience I shared with you of my grandfather, that's 100 years ago. But Canada also has experiences involving our Indigenous people that were forcibly removed. Those practices have now ended. We have had a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and I also believe we have important lessons from our Indigenous communities about the return of these children. So I stand here as someone who not at all times, finds this an easy topic, because we have all had various experiences with this issue, but it's one that we must be relentless in our focus. And I welcome hearing more from those who are working on two vectors. One includes, three perhaps, arbitrary detention writ large. Canada has spearheaded a working group, and we've had quite a bit of discussions in the UN context and elsewhere just on arbitrary detention and international law writ large. Number two, on the use of child soldiers, where Senator Romeo Dallaire, who was the head of the UN force in Rwanda, has been very active in terms of rehabilitation of child soldiers. And the third is our work on women, peace, and security. We can make this, I think, about children and also about these broader principles of international law. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Turning to Colin Scicluna, sorry, I'm very bad with names, who's the head of Cabinet of Vice President for Democracy and Demography in the European Commission. Maybe one question, given that we are at the beginning of a new political institutional cycle in the European Union, how can we make sure that this topic is not only kept on the agenda, but that we actually accelerate what we are doing?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to listen to what's been said so far this morning, because I think it's, one thing that is striking is that normally in settings like this, we tend to try to put aside emotion. But I think that in this particular instance, we actually need to make sure that emotion remains part of it, because we need to be angry, we need to be outraged, we need to be shocked by what's happened. And I think what was said very early on, that there isn't enough of an international outcry, is something that we really need to work on, among other things. When I look at the very topic, talking about bringing kids back, of course that is the main objective. But there is a twin objective, which is that of making sure that those who are responsible are punished, that they pay for what has been done. This is equally important. And I remember the mantra from the activists who are behind setting up the International Criminal Court, that there is no peace without justice. And this needs to remain something that is very much at the forefront of our actions. As you mentioned, we're in a period of transition here in Brussels, with the institutional cycle coming to an end and the new one starting. I think that the plight of Ukraine remains very high on the agenda, and I think that the political leadership, whatever shape, form it will take, will remain committed to continuing to support Ukraine and to live up to the idea that we will stand with Ukraine, whatever it takes. We will stand with Ukraine until there is the outcome that Ukraine deserves in this unfortunate, in this tragic conflict. And of course, the plight of the children themselves is a very important part of it. I was struck by what Baroness Kennedy said when she said that this is not only a crime against Ukraine, it is a crime against the future of Ukraine. It's a crime against the aspirations of Ukraine. And that really, I think, encapsulates the severity of the issues that we're dealing with. The European Union, I think, has been a steadfast partner, and in particular on issues related to Ukrainian children more broadly, including the deported children. There are a number of things that we have done. There's a lot more that we can do, and we need to ensure that we continue doing, of course. But I would like to mention some of the things that we have been engaged in. First of all, within the context of the Bring Kids Back Ukraine initiative, where we have been strong supporters, we have been active participants. Within the UN system, we have worked closely with, especially with the ongoing work on children and armed conflict, and especially applying this to the situation in Ukraine, and also bringing in the fact that the deported children are a very important facet of this, and that we need, that special attention needs to be devoted there as well. Of course, there's also the work that is being done by the International Criminal Court, and there the EU has also been supporting this very consistently in a number of ways, and through a number of channels, including through the services of Europol, through Eurojust, and various institutions and bodies that can support this effort. Of course, Ukraine is a candidate country for accession to the European Union, and this is not an insignificant detail. This is something that is extremely important because it ties the future of Ukraine, the fortunes of Ukraine, together with the future and the fortunes of the rest of the European Union. And that means that what is happening in Ukraine is something that is more clearly and more fundamentally, in a way, linked to what we are doing in the EU. One important aspect of this kind of pre-accession period and process is also linked to children and to improving the conditions of children. And I would like to point to a pilot project that we launched last year in Poland, where we are working on the deinstitutionalization of children who had been living in institutionalized facilities in the Ukraine and continued to do so when they became refugees in the European Union. This will be a template in the future within Ukraine itself, and will be an integral part of the accession process. And there are many examples of this, where the unfortunate situations that have arisen as a result of the conflict are also giving us an opportunity to help and to contribute to the longer term. In a sense, this is also part already of the reconstruction process. It may be premature to talk about reconstruction, but I think that the fact that we are looking at all of this with such a long-term perspective shows the level of commitment that there is, and that this is something that we want to make sure works, and works already now. So I think that coming back to what I was saying at the very beginning, I think that the working paper itself makes for very sobering reading, and of course we need to analyze the specifics of it. But I think that we would not dispute certainly the findings of this paper, the basis on which this paper is predicated, and I think that perhaps it can help us in the coming weeks as a rallying call to address the fact that not enough perhaps has been said and done in the international sphere to really highlight this awful, truly awful situation that has been unfolding. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, Petra Gombalova-Kislingarova, head of the Ukraine division and the External Action Service.
Thanks a lot, It's a pleasure to be here, and as always, when I see Ukrainian friends, it is also very interesting to hear the news stories of these very wrongful acts by Russia. And I think what Colin and also Daria were saying, I think we need to keep this storytelling alive, because this is the way how we can also forge the international attention. As many things were already said, I will focus on probably 4 or 5 points. First of all, when I was reading the working paper, but also when I was digging into the situation in Ukraine, it's very heartbreaking to see that Russia has been doing forceful transfers and deportations since 2014. And unfortunately, this has increased after the full-fledged invasion of Russia. And indeed, as it was said, we have to act now. So what we as the EU are doing. So first of all, overall, we have an important, strong policy of non-recognition of Russia's temporary occupation of territories of Ukraine, including Crimea. And in that sense, we have regular dialogues, and I see Ambassador, we had a regular dialogue on the territories last, like 2 weeks ago. We have also human rights dialogues, which allows us and to member states as well to evaluate the impact of Russia's aggression on Ukraine, and to raise and transmit all these findings to the international fora. So our colleagues are acting in New York, in Council of Europe. We are raising it also in our discussions with different countries. And for example, also in the context of the summit, which is to be organized, which is being organized during the weekend, for example, we engage with China on issues of children. This was part of our discussion with Chinese special envoy in March this year. Because we saw that all the 3 areas which are planned for the summit, the humanitarian issues, nuclear safety and food security, are exactly the 3 areas where we see the engagement with the world is possible. But unfortunately, China, as we know, they are not responsive to these calls. Again, on the summit, we will be very much present there. We will have 3 presidents coming. And HRVP, so really a strong support, and I'm very pleased that all our member states will be present, and apart from 3 who have some internal issues, all will be at the highest level. I think that this is also demonstration of the very strong support of the European Union for Ukraine. And when we have engaged in a very broad outreach via our embassies, and to support the Ukrainian and Swiss endeavor for the successful peace summit. And here I would also like to stress that our outreach was not only like to support the comprehensive, just and lasting peace, but it was also an opportunity for us to tackle Russia's disinformation. And as you know, Russia many times is raising the issue with also other countries, saying, well, the numbers, the 20,000 children are not correct. Where do you have it? So they basically contest the numbers, they contest the practice. So in each and every discussions which we had in recent times and constantly, we raised the issue, and our line is very simple. Even if it was 1 child which would be transferred, it's too many. And I think that this is something which we need to continue to echo and raise with all the world. And this will be also the opportunity for our presidents to pay attention to this issue. I'm also pleased to say that we will soon hopefully become observer of the International Coalition for Return of Children. We are finalizing our internal procedures, and in fact, it is a matter of days we would be able to announce our participation, which also my colleague who is here was working on. And one important thing which has not been mentioned, it is that we are also punishing Russia for its awful acts. Of course, there will be a lot of discussion, and there is still a lot of work going on accountability on the ICC front, on the Special Tribunal. But what we are doing now, and it is the imposition of sanctions on Russia. We have so far imposed sanctions on 60 individuals which are involved in deportation, forced transfers of Ukrainian children, but also in re-education and militarization. And I'm very pleased, I cannot say more, but the next package, the 14th package, which hopefully will be finalized very soon, will also contain some listings on like addressing the Russia's acts related to children. And another issue which is more like globally, we also very much support Ukraine financially, also to address the issues which were raised here, and this is the mental health and also like how to help the children when they come back. And we have been discussing this recently, that we need to step up our support also in this regard. I would probably stop here and basically just reiterate that there cannot be an impunity, and the European Union will do its utmost to make sure Russia pays.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all the speakers. We've got a little bit of time also to engage with you. So if anyone has a burning question, wants to engage with anything, then please identify yourself. And also, if you have the question directed at a particular speaker, then mention that, please. So we've got 1, 2, and I will only have one round of questions, so if there's anyone else, no, 3.
My first question is to Prosecutor General. We have an official statistics that more than 19,000 children were abducted, but according to some public and maybe not that official sources, the number of the abducted children could exceed the hundreds and thousands of children. So my question is, what are you thinking about that? At that stage, rumors, and how many cases still under investigation now? I mean, how many children we still suspect to be abducted? My second question is to Madame Zarivna, if I may. You mentioned 2 child houses in Oleshki and in Kherson, but that is not the only child houses in Ukraine. So how many such places in Ukraine are vulnerable to the Russian aggression? How many children and orphans could be victims of such kind of crime? And excuse me for being too long, I don't know to whom address that question, maybe to Her Excellency Campbell, because you mentioned that there is a problem of the child soldiers, including Russia. So it is not only the problem of Rwanda, for instance. Right now we see that they are trying to overturn Ukrainian children to the child soldiers and in the future to fight against Russia and the entire world. But that problem is that they're doing that not only with Ukrainians, they're doing that with their own children. So that what kind of international fora could be used to take those in charge for accountability?
Thank you. Then question in front here.
My is Mariam Lambert, co-founder of Orphans Feeding Foundation, working, I think, for the 53 times in Ukraine, and mainly working on the children, the return of the children. I couldn't stay silent. I could have listened to you, but it's very close to our heart because we are witnessing also the reunion. We are getting requests from parents, and this is from Mr. Kostin. We have evidence that more and more children are not only deported, but when they resist to deportation, they are being detained. So we have now list of children who are from 14, 13 years old, up to 18. They are being detained and accused of different things like terrorism, attack. All those cases are fake. We are absolutely desperate because we know that you could have the best lawyer everywhere in the world. There's nothing you can do. This is where you, politician, could really have to put pressure on releasing those children. Otherwise, one of the cases that we will maybe discuss more in details, she's 17 and in 2 weeks she will be detained in an adult prison in Rostov. That girl will be completely missing for life. The parents don't want to talk about this, they are scared. This is why we need to also to mention the important work that the journalist investigation are doing. However, when kids are being published and pictures on the screen and shared, parents are also raising concern that if their kids is on the television, there is no hope to be returned. So this is something maybe we can talk more into discussion. And I would like to thank, of course, Mrs. Zarivna for the presentation and Bring Kids Back, which you have done an enormous work. But us as a civil society, we would like to know how we can strengthen partnership. There are many areas we work with. We sometimes, and of course there's a war going on in our country, but we feel that we don't know to whom to report back, simply. And we have evidence. We are working on sanction with the EU, so we have evidence of 46 officials from Ukraine who were involved in the whole chain. And on the political level, we are just civil society, but we do try to do a lot of backdoor channel, for example, with the BRICS countries. And I would be very grateful if we could really consider the civil society in this work, because you mentioned a few days ago on your Twitter, which I follow you a lot, that this is a war against a horrible person. And in those situations, let's really be united all together, join forces, and do this and return those children as soon as possible, because as you mentioned, those children are being not only adopted, but also there's an ethical problem. Once they are adopted, those children recognize their Russian parents as the parents because they don't remember their real parents. They're adopting when they are babies, 2 years old, and when they are returned, they're 5. There is a really, it's not only a crime, it's a horrific ethical problem we are getting. So, sorry, I had to intervene a little bit, but I'm just listening to you. Thank you.
There was one.
Thank you very much for the overview. It's been very interesting to listen to you and the state of the situation at the moment. My question is probably more to Mr. Kostin and Ms. Zarivna. And my apologies, I haven't introduced myself. I'm Nana Barbakadze-Leenaert. I'm head of EU advocacy in Amber Alert Europe Foundation. It's a foundation in the Netherlands working on children's rights. And listening to you and your overview and the situation, I was wondering, I was thinking of how can we help and trying to develop some ideas, but I was wondering about your thoughts. How could we as civil society active in the European Union help you going further?
Thank you very much. As always, we are very short on time. I'll be going a little bit into the coffee break, but if I can ask the panelists to really try to keep it to 1 minute, and then take the discussion outside and continue in the coffee break so that we can finish close to time. I'll go in reverse order. I'll start. You want to come in on any of the points?
I can just thank for the suggestions for listings and also the call for civil society. If you have any suggestions for further listings, we will be more than happy to bring them on board.
I give my minute.
Okay.
Me too. I work for human rights, so I think coffee breaks are important.
Okay. Very good. Then, please.
Thanks a lot. First, the first question about the possible number of institutions. Yeah. So first of all, we don't have an access to temporarily occupied territories. So this is why we do not have all the complex data. But according to our presumptions, it's up to 10 institutions who have been abducted. Second question, Mariam, first of all, I want to thank you for helping us with the book on Bring Kids Back UA initiative about the children, which we will be presenting in a few minutes. And of course, civil society. I guess that your two questions, they pretty correspond with each other, so I will give the one answer. Here we have Maxim. He is Chief Operating Officer he's leading the stream of Bring Kids Back UA. So I guess that you can contact him and he will be happy to give you all the information, what we need, what we seek from civil society. Also, what is special about Bring Kids Back UA is that you're absolutely right. There are different stakeholders in this topic, and sometimes they meddle and smash with each other. It happens sometimes. So the key idea of the president's initiative is to coordinate all these processes and stakeholders. So I'm pretty sure that if you will talk to Maxim, he can connect you with the relevant partners and can come up to you with the relevant products or projects which you can support or help with. And thanks a lot again for all your support.
Yeah, thank you. I will try to be short. First of all, coming back to the figure. So the figure we are using in our files publicly, this is the figure which is contained in our information of our National Information Bureau, which is a relevant authority of Ukraine for such information. Of course, we have a lot of information that the figure is potentially bigger. Yes, we understand this, but we can operate as the investigative and prosecutorial authority only within the facts for which we have investigation. So for which we have some facts more or less in order to understand that we are investigating deportation of specific number of children. Once again, we understand that it could be more. You ask about the number of criminal cases. I already mentioned so we have 168 cases which combine many. It doesn't mean that one case, one child. So the case can contain hundreds or tens of children because as Daria mentioned in her presentation, there are absolutely different stories, and within this, the types of instruments Russia used for abduction, some of the cases we combined in our proceedings. Thank you for mentioning this new policy which Russia is using. So what they're using, so to fake allegations, they try to charge with against our kids. This is the next step of policy which they use against Ukrainian civilians, which they use as hostages. Because when we started to be very vocal about about the grown-ups, it was at the 1.5 years ago, something like this, because the case of deportation of children was well known from the very first, let's say, months or weeks of the war, while we understood that the grown-ups who Russia also forcibly deported from our land, and whom they use illegally, detain in many different facilities, is of course another war crime committed. And we completely understood that it will be more difficult to organize, let's say, unconditional return of the civilians, of the people who are grown-ups, because Russia in many cases start these fake criminal proceedings against them. And what you mentioned, that you have facts that they start to use the same approach to children, I think it's the, let's say, it's the evidence that what Russia is committing against Ukrainian civilians and Ukrainian children is their intentional policy. This is one more argument and evidence that this is intentional policy to persecute, to terrorize, to put pressure. And actually, let's be very frank, Russia is using this type of international crime as forced deportation of children and civilians as a weapon of war. Because the weapon or instrument of war is, the aim of it is to, how to say, to lead to the most painful result, let's say like this. You know, hitting this or striking this Ukrainian children, Ukrainian future. So they want to make, how to say, as a result, to make to be more painful for Ukraine, for Ukrainian society, and of course for the families, for these children themselves. This is the same as they use the sexual violence as a weapon of war, torture as a weapon of war, the putting Ukrainians in unliving conditions, leaving them without electricity, heating, water during the winter time, you know, destroying our energy and critical infrastructure. This is about using all these international crimes as weapons of war. We need to be very frank with this. And coming back to how civil society can help, of course, to share information with us. We have established in the Office of Prosecutor General, maybe you know, that the platform where we cooperate with civil society and organizations and NGOs. We call it International Board of Experts, yes, and where more than 40 civil society and NGOs who work on specific directions of our accountability efforts, like children, like sexual violence, and crimes against environment and many others. And of course, we have a protocols established with the with NGOs and civil society. For instance, how to avoid re-traumatization of the like potential victims and survivors, with whom you as civil society can having more access and having more time and instruments can interact first. And of course, we understand that the issue of trust, in some instances, victims and survivors trust more civil society rather than the government authorities. We, working with civil society together, we of course want to establish this trust with us. And with many investigative NGOs who help us, they know if they, for instance, interact and if they understand that there is a potentially that this person could be a victim and survivor, they know that they stop this communication. They propose to disclose this information to us, and if survivor is ready to do it, then they reach us and somehow transfer this potential victim and survivor, and then we start to work. Because you're absolutely right, we are commending the work of investigative journalists worldwide. We need to be absolutely sure that in some instances, first communication with victim and witness is critically important to establish justice for him or for her as victim and survivor. And in many instances, we try to organize this, that even journalists, they understand that it's better to keep it for yes, for investigators. In some cases, I can say it, we established this specifically for the investigators of the ICC. So they were first to talk with some of the children who returned back from Russia, specifically because we knew that it will be critically important for their case in the ICC. I tried to be short, but I think that it will be not. It was not short, but very last element for the civil society. I think what we are talking about, we are and the victims, survivors, children, politicians, you all. So we are telling truth, and truth, I think, is the best. How to say, the best instrument to eliminate disinformation. Our institutions are not just telling truth; we are establishing truth as facts in course of proceedings, because the verdict of court is about to establish, to confirm the truth. And I think what is important for the civil society is, of course, to work with politicians here, for politicians to be more active, because the word now used by Baroness Helena Kennedy and used by my friend Daria is very important word. Now means now, not tomorrow, not the day after tomorrow. And definitely politicians can do more. And civil society can, of course, help politicians to be more active. And as the other element, to tell the truth to the countries, to the governments who are still under Russian influence of disinformation. And the book, thank you for helping with the book, and the book we will be presenting a couple of minutes later. I think it's a great example that this is the truth. This truth is, told by children themselves, and their stories are told by them. And this is critically important to show to the politicians and to the governments of the other countries who are still maybe thinking also to join our coalition or to help to return our children back home, to show to them and say, this is the truth. And this is actually maybe first time in history when children are on the table, at the table of delivering justice to themselves and to the other victims and survivors. And this is not, let's not forget, it's our joint commitment together with the ICC and with all other institutions for children's voices to be heard not only in media, not only in books, but also in the courtrooms. And this, I think, this truth is the best argument to fight against disinformation, which Russia is also using as a weapon of war. Sorry for being too long. Yeah.
I'm sorry, but we are really out of time. Thank you all for engaging with this difficult discussion. It is hard to hear some of this, but it's even harder, so much harder for Ukrainian colleagues to endure this. And it's infinitely harder, and it's hard to imagine what it is like for the families and the children involved. So it is clear Russia is using the abduction of children as an instrument of war, as an instrument of terror, an instrument of genocide. And whatever the war is about, whatever happens elsewhere, whatever the geopolitics, this is never acceptable. There is no circumstance under which this can be tolerated, and no people and no parents can ever tolerate this. So I'm not going to conclude this discussion, because this discussion is not over until the children are home. And it's all of our responsibility to ensure that this topic does not slip from the agenda, but that we actually carry out the action which has been called for, and that we also continue to support Ukraine in their fight against aggression, because in the end, it could be all of our children. Thank you very much.
Hello, we're going to start part two. We're waiting for Mrs. Zarivna to return from a meeting. I'm sure she'll just be a couple of minutes. So during this session, we're going to be talking about and presenting the book and documentary. I have a copy of the book here called Living the War. I would really highly recommend everybody to look at this. I started to read it yesterday night. There's a lot of case studies in here, or testimonies by children, I should say, who've lived through the war, been impacted by the war. After about 4 of them, I can tell you that I was crying. It's extremely emotional, and I think it's very important that people actually read this, and not only that, but that this publication and the documentary is actually spread to all 4 corners of the world. And we're going to be seeing a clip from the documentary and some testimonies very shortly. But before that, I want to give the floor to Vsevolod Chentsov, Ukraine's ambassador to the EU, for some opening remarks.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much, Amanda, and many thanks for joining us for this second part of this conference for the presentation of the book Living the War, Volume 2, Children During the Russian War Against Ukraine. And indeed, as we hear during the first part, Russian war of aggression against Ukraine is causing enormous human suffering. And this is a clear manifestation of Russia's disregard to the human rights, human lives, and basic principle of international law, including humanitarian law. And Russia, during those 900 plus days, continue its indiscriminate attacks against civilian infrastructure, killing actually almost on daily basis Ukrainian civilians, including kids. And the number of kids suffered because of those Russian actions are horrific. But it's not, when we're talking about this book and other material representing the real stories, real life, it's not only about the numbers, but about the story and the human being behind those numbers. And indeed, I like this idea mentioned during the first part of our discussion. Then the kids, they become not only the subject of our discussion, of our protection, but they became the actors themselves. They're speaking out, they're telling their story, and they're prompting us adults to do now and to do more, to protect them and to bring them back to Ukraine. And another point I would like to build up, what Russia is doing to Ukrainian kids. It's not just a side effect of the war as they try to portray it. It's a deliberate action, it's a strategy, and those atrocities which Russian Federation do in Ukraine, disappearances, tortures, forced passportization, mobilization of Ukrainian people on the occupied territories, all those actions, they amount to genocide, war crimes, and they should be duly prosecuted on the international level. In that regard, I wanted to use this opportunity and to thank our colleagues in the EU institutions and member states which join our efforts in the core group looking for the proper instrument, international mechanism to brought
the perpetrators of those crimes to justice. Also wanted to use this opportunity to thank all who help us to already now at least to name and single out those who committing those crimes or help in the Russian administration or on occupied territories to steal Ukrainian kids. And in both 12 and 13 sanctions package, we have relevant names of the Russian criminals included. And I hope that we will see additional listings in the 14th and forthcoming packages. Last but not least, I wanted to praise the European Commission for tabling the proposal just day before yesterday to extend the duration of the temporary directive to protect Ukrainians on the EU territory, including kids, because we need to take care not only about the kids who we are bringing back to Ukraine, but also kids here under protection to make sure that they get necessary education, necessary social protection, medical service. And as it was mentioned before, the issue of mental health is one of the most crucial problems, both in Ukraine and also here, because the families are separated, and kids need to feel Ukrainian, to feel protected, and when the situation allows, to be brought to Ukraine. And really, last point from my side, during the first part we hear those terrible stories about Russian treatment of Ukrainian kids in Russia. Then it's sometimes difficult or impossible to trace the kids. And you can compare with the situation on the EU territory. And we already have successful projects and where we do deinstitutionalization of treatment of Ukrainian orphans and kids under protection, bringing them from the institutions on the EU territory to the families. And we want to do the same in Ukraine. So my point is that even under such difficult circumstances, we can already kind of test the modern, more progressive instruments, how to help kids in a more efficient way, at the same time to keep the situation under control, to understand how they're treated, who is taking care of them, and as I mentioned before, to make sure that the situation allows to bring them back to their families or to the substituting families in Ukraine. So thank you very much again for joining us today, and back to Amanda.
Yeah, thank you, Ambassador Chentsov, for these opening remarks, and again for flagging up many of the important issues that were already highlighted this morning. I want to give the floor now immediately to Ms. Zarivna. Could you give us a bit of the background for the book and the documentary? I was just saying before what an excellent piece of work this is and how it should be promoted globally. I would like to see the documentary on Netflix, or at least to have as well a number of global publishing houses pick this up and put it into bookstores around the world where people can actually take it, and it'll get very good visibility. But first of all, we'd like to hear from you about the documentary in more details.
Yes, thanks a lot. Yes, I would be I'm very delighted to meet up. Sorry. Yeah, thank you for such a kind words. And first of all, I'm pretty sure that this is just the beginning, this book, and we definitely will have the documentary on Netflix. And we. Thank you. Deal. So, speaking about Leaving the War, it's a documentary. It consists of 8 very personal stories of different children, which lives have been affected by war in very, very different aspects. Again, I would like to thank Mariam Lomberg, who is today with us, who also helped and supported us in this work, and many different people who contributed to this book, especially some Ukrainian photographers, such as well-known Sasha Maslov, such as Mikhailo Palinchuk. They all are Ukrainian photographers who work for international media, such as New York Times, Washington Post, and so on. I'm also very grateful for the co-writers in this book, for Andriy Kostin, who also is an author of one of the parts of the book. I also should say that this book in general is like part of Bring Kids Back UA, an initiative of President Zelensky, which was launched a year ago. And the exhibition, which you will also see later, is also the part of this initiative, and we are planning to have this exhibition movable. We are planning to show it in different European cities. So the key thing, I guess, here is the core of the book is these personal stories of children. I would name a few of them. One which like really deeply, very deeply painful is the story of Arina, who were brought to the village of her grandmother in Kherson region. And by 25th of February, this village was under the occupation. The father of Arina was trying to take them out, her and her brother, and to bring them to Odessa. So he took a car and he came on a car and he wanted to evacuate them from there. But unfortunately, the car was shot by Russian soldiers and the father of Arina was dead. She was wounded. This is one kind of a story. The second story is Sasha's story from Nova Grigorivka. It's a southern village. And this is a story about Sasha and his father who attempted to get into the constant bombings. They were hiding in a after this intense shelling, they were hiding in the basement. And when the Ukrainian armed forces deliberated Novogrigorivka, and they went out from the basement, they figured out that their house was completely destroyed and there was nothing left. But this story has some part of inspiration, because due to help of different figures and persons and organizations, including even the pop group Imagine Dragons, this house of Sasha and his father was rebuilt. This story gives us some hope. Anyway, I will give you an opportunity to make your own point of view, your own impression, and really hope that you will have an opportunity to read the book, to look at the photographs. So, yeah, I think that in general, that's it.
Thank you. I think we're going to be seeing a clip very shortly. So please, everybody, get your tissues ready because it's extremely emotional, but that's what we need to feel when we're talking about these these issues. But first I want to come to you, Prosecutor General. Welcome back. This morning, during your presentation, we heard from you about the unprecedented efforts undertaken by Ukrainian prosecutors to investigate and prosecute the forcible transfer and deportation of Ukrainian children. Could you also address other crimes against and affecting children in Ukraine during the ongoing full-scale invasion by Russia?
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Daria. Thank you, Ambassador. I think it's evidently clear to all of us that no child in Ukraine has been spared by Russia's aggressive war against Ukraine. It has devastating ramifications on children, being direct victims of atrocities, witnessing horrendous crimes committed in front of their eyes, or as a consequence of a displacement, forced to change their lifestyle. This is a tragedy, so well depicted in cases presented in the book Leaving the War, Volume 2. From the very first days of war, we realized that we would need to take into consideration the sensitivity of cases involving vulnerable groups, including children, when it comes to investigation, prosecution, as well as we also understand that we need to act in the best interest of a child in every relevant proceeding. So, the Department for the Protection of Children's Interests of the Office of Prosecutor General, which oversees investigations and procedural oversight of the cases related to children, we created this special department in order to meet these challenges. The department also secures implementation of child-sensitive approaches, linkages with broader policy priorities, including preventive mechanisms and referral programs. Second, last year we have introduced victims and witnesses coordinators in order to provide assistance in course of the criminal proceedings. So they are not prosecutors, they are state servants specifically trained in order to be like bridges between victim survivors and law enforcement system. Their work is to share of information with victims and survivors, guide them through the process, adopt sensitive approaches, and take into consideration their specific needs. They are already working with children, victims of atrocity crimes. My latest report, I have met with my team last week. They have informed that they're already working with more than 550 children as the special coordinators with victims and survivors. And third, the investigation of the complex war crimes of shelling, unlawful confinement, and or torture of group of civilians is being supervised by War Crimes Department that specializes in international crimes. Though these initiatives are tailored to the criminal proceedings, we also see it as part of a broader policy that aims to prevent violence against children. Indeed, crimes against and affecting children is a broad category, by scale and scope covering the child-specific crimes such as forced transfer and deportation, the recruitment, enlistment and use of child soldiers, as well as other generic crimes that affect children in different ways, nature and form, such as torture, inhuman treatment, sexual violence, indiscriminate shelling. And we witness them in Ukraine on a daily basis. Since the beginning of full-scale invasion of 24th of February 2022, 1,370 children have been injured and 551 killed. Children in Dnipropetrovsk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, Kyiv, Lugansk, Mykolaiv, Odessa, Kharkiv, Kherson and Chernigiv regions have been most affected. The stories are heart-wrenching, still vivid in memories of loved ones. In April of this year, a 4-year-old girl was seriously injured in the yard of her own house in Odessa as a result of shelling of the city. A fragment of a Russian rocket hit the child's heart. Doctors tried to save her for almost a month, but without success. She died. In February of this year, a tragedy struck one of our own, the Prosecutor family with her 3 sons, 7 years, 4 years, and the youngest merely 10 months old. All 4 killed as a result of drone attacks in the city of Kharkiv. The mother held the children, hugging and pressing them to her chest. The burning temperature was such that baby's bones and body were almost reduced to ashes. Children are also survivors of conflict-related sexual violence, including rape. So far, in course of ongoing investigations, we have identified 15 survivors of conflict-related sexual violence who are children, 14 girls and 1 boy. Torture is also being committed against children in Lugansk, Kharkiv, Kherson, and Chernigiv regions. We have identified 82 survivors of torture. Cases of children's illegal deprivation of liberty had been identified in Zaporizhia, Kyiv, Kherson, and Kharkiv regions, where we have 3 girls and 30 boys as survivors of this crime. The Russian army uses children in hostilities, such cases being identified in Donetsk, Zaporizhia, Kyiv, Kharkiv, and Chernigiv regions. We have issued notice of suspicion against 54 members of Russian armed forces for war crimes committed against children. We have indicted 43 of them, and we have already convicted 31 of them in Ukrainian courts. As you would understand, we prioritize those cases due to the vulnerable nature of victims. Schools and hospitals that are not military targets are also attacked. So far, we have registered damage and destruction of 3,245 child-related facilities. We believe that these numbers, even as devastating as they are, do not describe the full scale of atrocities and crimes against and affecting children due to ongoing hostilities and continued occupation of the part of our territory. As a primary duty bearer, we extensively investigate international crimes against children, but our web of accountability does not exist in isolation, as evidenced from the efforts undertaken on international level in response to Russia's forcible transfer and deportation of Ukrainian children. The same holds true for other crimes against and affecting children. We closely partner with international and regional organizations as well as specialized agencies such as UNICEF in order to implement best international standards. We receive legal advice and technical assistance from our partners, including Atrocity Crimes Advisory Group. As we speak, the team of prosecutors specializing in children's cases, led by one of my deputies, are on study visit in United Kingdom. At the same time, we need to establish a sustainable assistance in order to implement effective modalities for eradicating grave violations against children, for protecting them through adequate services and securing full accountability. Therefore, the international community's contribution remains crucial in this direction. Thank you.
It's really hard to listen to your words. I mean, it's very painful, no more so than for Ukrainians, but it's really important that people hear these words, and it's really important that more support comes from the international community. I mean, we heard that this morning, but it seems to me this is still quite limited, and there's much more that can actually be done, and we should be working towards that with much more advocacy and outreach and presenting these findings and these statistics and this picture of what's the horrendic barbaric activity that is carried out in Ukraine by the Russian aggressor. I'm not sure if we're going to see is it now, Maxime, we're seeing the clip? And then I'll come back to you.
Actually, Amanda, if you don't mind, I would add a few words.
Oh yes, I'm just trying to get it into the order. Yeah, so please go ahead.
Yeah, because I'm familiar with this video, and like I was responsible for the part of the book which is called the political indoctrination. And the story of Ilya is, I suggest that we listen very carefully to him and to his witnesses, because like when he was brought to hospital and how he was saved by Russians, and what they have been doing to him in the hospital, what kind of psychological pressure he experienced. I guess that it's really necessary to listen to it carefully, because the main question which we need to answer is what happens with all these children when they have been abducted and when they have been transported from the one territory to another. What happens next? And what is really important to know and to understand that according to Yale Research Humanitarian Lab, now there are almost 30 political re-education camps functioning in Russia. What does it mean, political re-education camp? Frankly speaking, this is the practice which was like widely used during the Soviet Union times, when the children of the so-called the people who were branded as people's enemies and brought to Gulag, they have been sent to these re-education camps where they had received some brainwashing experiences. And what we see now is that this Gulag experience is used and revived in nowadays. So I suggest that we listen to Ilya.
My name is Ilya. I am 11 years old, but at that time I was 9. I live in Mariupol with my mother and brother. Well, used to live. Before the war, everything was fine. I had a good mother, a good school, friends, and a home. In general, my city was cool. At first, everything was relatively quiet, and then the explosion started. And after that, I realized that the war had already begun. Once we went to a neighbor's house to hide for the night, because our house was hit by a rocket, and it was no longer possible to live in it. And then there was a boom. I was injured here, here, and my mom was hit in the forehead. I realized that my mom was dead when this neighbor came to her and took her pulse. And after that, we all knew that my mother had died. I, more or less, managed to hold myself together. But it was very painful. Mentally, it hurt me much more than the pain injury brought me. The neighbor buried my mother in our own yard, behind our own house. They didn't just kill my mother, they literally did not only give her no chance to survive, but gave no chance to all the people in Mariupol. They treat civilians as if they were some kind of main enemy of peace. I stayed with the neighbors in that house for a while, and then one day these Russian soldiers came and announced evacuation. I was in Donetsk for a month. I underwent various surgeries and procedures there. The very first operation was to remove this fragment, but it was not easy. It was done without anesthesia. Despite the fact that I had a serious injury, in that hospital they still tried to, well, make me into a kind of propaganda tool. I was taught to write in Russian. And one day my doctor came to me and said that now you will not say glory to Ukraine, but glory to Ukraine as part of Russia. This was probably one of the methods of zombification. But I am not the one to be duped so easily.
Коли почалася повномасштабна війна, After the full-scale war started on the 24th of February, I had contact with my daughter until the 2nd of March. And when contact was lost and there was no electricity, my son in Austria had already found a video for me from the Russian Federation, where Ilya was admitted to a hospital, a trauma center in Donetsk. And he sent me this video, and I learned that Ilya was alone in the hospital, and my daughter had been killed. I realized that my daughter could no longer be brought back. And I realized that Ilya had to be freed from Donetsk. And then I'd already begun to dream about how it would be, and began to knock on different doors, and thank God they helped me to do it. On the 22nd of April, we returned to Akhmedov Hospital in Ukraine. He couldn't walk. There, our doctors took 4 fragments out of him. 11 more remain. He was in such a condition. You should understand, he had a school, he had a home, he had a mother, and he lost all of that, his entire childhood. He kept to himself, he was afraid of noise, he was afraid of air raid sirens. He had no memory. He remembered only those moments that were with him in that horror that he went through with his mother in Mariupol.
In the future, I would like to become a doctor, so that I can be the same as our guys on the front lines, combat medics and ordinary ones. They are all real heroes. They're like soldiers, although their work is a little different, but they are all heroes.
What a tragic, sad video. It's difficult to know what to say, to not sit here and actually cry. But at the same time, what an amazing little boy, huh? To say that he hasn't been duped, that he shows what I can't imagine to be the level of resilience, on the surface at least. I mean, what's actually going on inside is probably something very different that will probably at some point in the future expose itself. But what an amazing child. But again, this video is harrowing. And this, of course, this is only one of, thousands and thousands and thousands of children who have been impacted by this brutal war in Ukraine. But I'd like to, it's difficult to come to the next question after that, to be honest. Huh? I feel honestly like we should be, I don't know, but to keep the debate going. But I want to come back to what you were saying in your presentation earlier about the Kherson region. I mean, I was in Kherson many times actually before the war. It was a very nice city. We all see how it's become, but it was one of the towns that's been particularly impacted. I mean, children there have been particularly impacted. So maybe I could ask you to say a few words about the consequences on Kherson.
Yeah, surely. Of course, everything, like all the stories about Kherson are deeply personal for me. I also lost everything that my family had in Kherson, starting from the small business. It was a dental clinic, and my father was a dentist. And with the house where we used to live in, everything is destroyed now. I guess the most stressful part of this was the episode when my grandmother, she was living in the village near Kherson under the constant shellings and bombardment. And once she went to the backyard, and the house was destroyed. and after this, because she refused to leave this village, she refused to leave the home, but when it was destroyed and she had nowhere to live in, she needed to move. So it was a real special operation to take her out of there. Of course, there is also Kakhovka and Dam Station and all the tragedy around it. We mentioned today our task force on illegally deported Ukrainian children, but we also have at the Office of the President of Ukraine, we have the special international high-level working group on ecological consequences of Russian invasion, and Andriy he's also a member of this group. Of course, we, there are so many consequences that ecological ones, you don't put them on the first place. But when this horrible tragedy, Kakhovka tragedy happened, it's like you look and you understand that a great variety of animals and plants, they were completely, some of them are on the brink of extinction after all that happened. So in general, of course, many different consequences. Of course, when Kherson was under occupation, it was a very hard times for everyone, but for minors, of course, it was extremely stressful. Again, I remember how I contacted my former school friends, some friends with whom I lived in one yard, and some of them, such as lawyers or human rights defenders, they were really under constant danger because it was, you couldn't, for example, go out from your home and go to the market, for example, because you could be caught up and brought to Russian police, and that could have very bad consequences for you. And of course, children also were living in this atmosphere. And again, in my presentation, I guess I already gave lots of context on Aleshkin house and Kherson Children's House. I guess that we already discussed this issue, but again, let me stress it out. 82 pupils from Aleshki boarding house and 46 children from Kherson Children's House, and they were all brought to Crimea, and they were all just abducted, and we managed to return only less than a dozen of them. So, of course, there are many stories, and the story of Ilya is, it's very touching and very emotional, but unfortunately we have many of such stories.
Unfortunately, yes. Last week on the BBC, they actually had a documentary on this topic. It was talking about children actually from Kharkiv who'd been kidnapped and deported, while on the other side it was underlining the difficult situations that other children had been through. I mean, some of them were still living there under very difficult conditions. Others had moved to Western Ukraine. But these sorts of initiatives are really important. Everybody needs to see this. I mean, not just people like us, because we're working in the field, right? I'm talking about ordinary people of the street who are sitting at home and eating their dinner at night. They need to see it, or they need to read it, because it makes a real emotional impact, because nobody wants to see small children being killed or maimed or disappeared or psychologically damaged. And that's when people sit up and think, yes, we need to do something about it, which is why this book, keep coming back to this book in the documentary, is so good, and why it needs to be spread around the world. But I want to come back to the last question to you, Prosecutor General, because I know we're already run over the time, but we had the longer coffee break. So I think we definitely need to cover this last point. Would you be able to elaborate on crucial tools like this book in influencing international perspectives and actions? You mentioned support of the international community earlier today and partners in the broader sense, covering all the grave violations committed against children. What more is needed to be done? And now, not in, 2 months or 2 years. I mean, things move quite slowly, as we've noticed already during Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. I mean, it takes forever to do anything, it seems.
Thank you, Amanda, and thank you, Daria, for adding these stories. And of course, we can add more and more. What I try to share with you today, of course, first and foremost, this book is about human stories, tragedies that children personally experienced, what they lived through and survived. And I want to express my gratitude, and I hope that I believe you will all share it with me. Gratitude to all children who found the courage to share their stories. And I think when we are talking about some politicians who are still trying to hide themselves from, looking at truth, from accepting the truth, to ask them not to talk to us, but to offer them to talk to Ilya, to talk to these children, to hear from them their stories. And then the world will see, are these politicians brave enough to meet face to face with children like Ilya? And their nations will see these politicians, if they are ready, if they are brave enough to meet and to hear children like Ilya. And I think that if we offer them to do this, then probably many politicians who are telling us, we've been in Davos in January. I will not name the person who told this because it was like closed meeting. But the person told, look, children are suffering every day in many other parts of the world. Why we need to do something special for Ukrainian children who are deported, etc. But I especially open the book in the page 114. This is part of my presentation, my input. But I will quote what my very good friend and very famous human rights lawyer told me when we spoke about how to return back Ukrainian children. I'm speaking about Kerry Kennedy from United States. And she told me, the same crimes are now happening against children in many countries around the world. And it's true, it's happening for many years. And she went on to say, if through joint efforts we manage to bring back Ukrainian children, then children in other countries will also have a chance for their lives to be saved. That's why when we unite our efforts to bring back Ukrainian children, to protect and to save Ukrainian children, because of our Ukrainian commitment to do as much as possible on our side to make it happen, because we are ready to unite all partners and all friends and all those who believe that human rights are important, that human rights are relevant, that international law and dozens of conventions, of international conventions, which Russia blatantly violates. But these conventions are for purpose. And if these conventions are irrelevant, then we all are at risk. Then it means that children in any country are at risk. Even country who feel or who think that this country is too far from Ukrainian front line, because they don't understand that the front line practically is everywhere, that the front line now is in heads of many people. And this front line, which is in the heads, tomorrow could be a real front line, and real children in their countries could be victims of real crimes. That's why I think, once again, that we need to use any opportunity to propose to those who still think that nothing's happening, that yes, children are suffering in the other places. But I add to what Kerry Kennedy took to the context of our meeting. It was last year in New York. She told me, you can't imagine how many efforts were undertaken by the, let's say, Western countries to help to protect children in many previous wars and conflicts in many parts of the world. And in many instances, we, I mean the Western countries, were not successful for many, many reasons. And she said that when Ukraine is ready to unite the world, and when we propose the ideas, when we propose plans how to deal with this problem, then there is a chance to do something for Ukrainian children, and then the others will have a chance to be protected. So this was the context of what she told. And the other part of this story is like politicians telling, look, nothing happened. Okay, children are suffering. Why should we do something for Ukrainian? You need to do for Ukrainian because then you will have a chance to protect the others. Because you will create a model, a system, which can be later on used to protect the other children. Because if we are not thinking about children, we are not thinking about future of our planet. I'm sorry to be a little bit emotional, but I think that this is after Ilya. It's not first time I hear Ilya, and I can add more people who can tell their stories, who can meet with leaders of the countries who are still trying to, shuffle or to shake, or I don't know how to say it, to swing, I don't know which word we can use. But they need to understand that meeting with those who suffer from that war, being brave as these children are, at least as these children are, means that they are real leaders. If they are not brave to meet with these people, then the international community, media, activists, any one of us will have a right to say publicly, these people are not leaders. They are not true politicians. They are just people who are using power in their hands for their personal, for their personal needs. And not pretend to be politicians who are trying to be now involved or included in very global politics, let's say like this. Thank you.
Thank you, and no need to apologize for being emotional. I think everybody in this room is emotional. There'd be something wrong with you if you weren't emotional. And I agree with every word that you said. And I can certainly think of a few leaders who need to change their approach, because by working together, children in the world who are all suffering can be helped by sitting on your backside, if I may use that in this sense, and doing nothing. That's not an answer to anything. In Ukraine, maybe, let's say, leading the field now, I would say, but there's space for many, many, many more countries to actually join in and be part of this process.
And at the end of the day, what Andriy said, and I think this is one of the most important messages, at the end of the day, it's not about Ukrainian children.
Yeah,
It's about all children in the world. And this is, and I guess that when we talk about peace formula, for example, and about the peace summit, which is leading to peace summit, the key idea also was not to find the peace solution for Ukraine only. The key idea was to develop the framework which could be scaled and used in different military conflicts all over the world. This is this win-win strategy. This is always the core, the principal core of all the projects or ideas of President Zelensky. And you're absolutely right, Andriy, that when we talk about Ukrainian children, we aim to protect all the children in the whole world. Thank you.
And for anybody who's not familiar or properly familiar with the peace formula, you can go onto our website. We have a YouTube video from a recent event that actually explains the peace formula and the next steps, how it functions, what the goals are, etc. And I think this is very useful actually for people to look at, to see how it's going to become actionable on all the different points that are on there, because this also needs to be put out there. This is the only peace formula in town. There's no other, there's no Chinese, no Brazil or anything else. This is the only one. Vsevolod, do you want to have a last word?
No, just to thank EPC for setting it up. It's very timely because just in 2 days the peace conference will start. And it's good to focus a bit on one of the most important elements of discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thanks to the support from your mission, from all your colleagues. Thanks especially to the Office of the Prosecutor General, to the Office of the OPU for working with us. It's always a great pleasure to host you. Not just a pleasure, it's an honor actually, and it's an honor for us to work and support Ukraine really to the end, till the liberation of all the territories. Until Ukraine's EU membership. What more can I say? So thank you for joining us. Thanks to the audience. This has been a very emotional day. It's certainly an issue that the EPC is going to continue to keep working on. It's not going to go away, and it shouldn't go away until every single child is back with its parents. So thanks again. There is a lunch outside waiting for you, and I wish you a good afternoon, or see you soon if you're going to the photo exhibition that's going to be in the Berlaymont from 3 o'clock, the Commission building. I hope you'll also take the time to look at the photo exhibition that's here in the corridor, because this is also very impactful. You look at this for a few seconds, you're going to have tears in your eyes, but this is what you need to have, because then you'll go away and you'll remember it and you'll spread the word. And this is what we need.
Thank you.
So thank you. Very nice to meet you in person.
Likewise.
Heard so much about you.
Yeah.